I call Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. It's a pleasure to speak in favour of Part 1 of the Employment Standards legislation bill, and also to note my support for the supplementary order paper in the name of Sue Moroney, which I'm sure she is looking forward to addressing with a call shortly. But Mr Chairman, I see these changes to our paid parental leave scheme as the natural evolution of something that was initially way back 15 years ago, back in 2001, when it was first being debated by this House, a big, bold, some would say scary new program that did not have the universal support that it enjoys in the House now. And so when you're introducing big, bold, audacious new programs such as this in the way that the Labor government was back in 2001, one has to start somewhere, and one has to start with a program that's going to garner the maximum possible support. And I note that back in 2001, it wasn't just the Labor and Alliance parties that voted in favour of paid parental leave, it was also the Green Party and it was also the New Zealand First Party. It's pleasing to see that those parties have been consistent in their support for paid parental leave over the years. And so naturally these programs do evolve, and Labor extended extended the availability of parental leave to 14 weeks. We extended it to self-employed people, and we felt over the last few years, we felt that it really is time to extend the to extend the provision of paid parental leave out to 26 weeks. That is what the science tells us we should be aiming for at this stage, and it allows for greater opportunities for the child and their parent, usually mum, but often dad, and as we are extending it to under this legislation, other primary caregiver as well. That's important, and the science tells us we should be doing this. So it is pleasing that the government has seen fit to do this. The other broad comment I would make is that the reason we are doing this, and other members have noted this, the reason we are doing this now is because of the very effective campaigning that's been carried out by the 26 for Babies campaign. It's been carried out by the Labor Party and has been carried out by Sue Moroney in making sure that paid parental leave remains on the agenda, and the need to extend both its eligibility and the period of time for which people can get paid parental leave remains on the agenda. So this bill does a number of things. One thing that hasn't been addressed too much in the debate so far is that it extends the entitlement for paid parental leave to workers who are in more precarious employment arrangements, such as casual agreements and seasonal agreements. And that's important, and we absolutely support that on this side of the House. We agree that was a natural evolution that was probably always going to happen, and it's about time that it did happen. It's particularly important that it happens in the context of what is happening in our labour market right now. Over 25% of the new jobs created since 2009 are in fact temporary work. They're casual, or they're part-time, or they're zero-hour contracts, and we'll get to that later on this evening. They're not permanent part-time jobs. And so as more and more of our workforce finds themselves in that type of precarious work, we have to ensure that these types of entitlements are extended to that workforce. Otherwise, actually, what happens is we get a shrinking number of people who are entitled to paid parental leave and to other minimum entitlements in our employment law if we only provide for those entitlements to people who are in that traditional form, that very good form of work, which is the permanent part-time role, as opposed to the more temporary and more precarious types of work. So I think it's important that we make this change now, as we are seeing more and more people moving into those types of roles. The bill, this part one of the bill, does also allow for more flexibility in the way that paid parental leave is taken, and in particular the concept of keeping in touch days. I really like this idea. I like the idea that people who, Mr. Chairman.
In Lees-Galloway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. People who are on paid parental leave, who wish to be able to come back into work every now and again to keep in touch or to attend training days or just to keep their working brains fresh and maybe even, dare I say it, to have a break from the work that is going on at home, because goodness knows, I think everybody in the House would agree that actually the work that goes on at home is often harder than the work that goes on in the workplace. That I think this is a very good idea, and Sue Moroney has an excellent amendment that just tweaks those keeping in touch days to make sure that it doesn't create a loophole, doesn't create an opportunity to exploit or to put pressure on workers. I think it's a good amendment. But that is an excellent idea and is a good way to improve the flexibility of the scheme. We've heard a lot this evening about the extension of paid parental leave to the parents of preterm babies. Again, a very, very good idea, but let it not be forgotten where that idea came from. It came from the fact that Sue Moroney was prepared to do absolutely anything to get this House to support legislation that would improve outcomes for parents and babies. And even when this House was prepared to support 26 weeks for babies, but the government was going to use its veto power on that, Sue Moroney said, look, if we can't get 26 weeks, if the government's not prepared to agree to that, let's at least apply that to the parents of preterm babies. The government wasn't prepared to do it when it was sponsored by a Labor member, but it is prepared to do it as a government bill, so be it. We will support it. We're not quite as churlish on this side of the House as they are on the other. It's a good idea, and this House should vote for it. It doesn't matter whose idea it is. Sir, this is a good extension of paid parental leave. As I say, I personally see it as nothing more than a natural evolution of the scheme. We've had paid parental leave. Well, it's 15 years since we first started debating the concept of paid parental leave in New Zealand. It has gone from something that divided this House, it's gone from something that the National Party and the ACT Party voted against, to being something that we all have agreement around. Sometimes, yeah, you've got to have the Labor Party and the parties of the left who are actually prepared to be progressive and to be prepared to be the groundbreakers on this and be prepared to take the slings and arrows that will be hurled in our direction. We know that the Conservative parties always catch up on this, and now it's great that this House is working in a united fashion to extend these provisions of paid parental leave. There's more work to do. We will get to 26 weeks eventually, not tonight, but we will get there eventually, and this is a good step along that path, sir.